Nora Velasca stood frozen at Gate C4, Boise International Airport, her pulse hammering like a trapped bird. Her grandmother, Evelyn, 78, clutched an empty boarding pass envelope, her frail hands trembling, her face pale as the fluorescent lights overhead. "No ticket," Evelyn whispered, her voice thin as winter air. "Richard said there's no ticket for me." Nora's father, Richard, turned away, his tailored coat swishing like a dismissal. He muttered something about Evelyn's heart condition, his words sharp and rehearsed, slicing through the hum of the terminal. Nora's eyes burned, not with tears, but with a fury she hadn't known she could feel. She'd believed him, just like Evelyn had. The promise of a family trip to Italy, a chance to stitch together the frayed edges of their family. Evelyn had paid $30,000, her savings drained from a lifetime of teaching third graders in Boise. She'd paid because Richard, with his salesman smile, had made her believe she was wanted. But there was no ticket, no seat, no Italy, just Evelyn, standing small in her navy cardigan, her gold-button pride unraveling in a crowd of strangers. Nora's mother, Celeste, adjusted her scarf, avoiding Evelyn's gaze. Aunt Lauren and her kids scrolled their phones, oblivious or pretending to be. Nora reached for Evelyn's hand, her own fingers cold. "I'm not going either," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside. Evelyn's eyes, clouded with hurt, flickered with protest. "Nora, you've dreamed of Florence." "Not like this," Nora said. "Not without you." The terminal buzzed with families hugging, suitcases rolling, announcements crackling. But Nora saw only Evelyn, her grandmother's fragile frame shrinking under the weight of betrayal. She'd always been the one to hold Nora together, baking bread in her modest kitchen, teaching her to plant roses, telling her stories of a Boise that no longer existed. Now, Evelyn was the one breaking. Nora's gaze caught on Richard's bag, left open by the check-in counter. A receipt peeked out, crumpled but legible. Her breath hitched as she snatched it, her eyes scanning the words. "Investment transfer, $30,000, R. Velasca." Not a travel agency, a real estate firm. Shady, unfamiliar. Her heart sank, then surged. He hadn't just lied. He'd stolen. As Richard and the others boarded, laughing like they'd already forgotten Evelyn, Nora heard a voice behind her. "You're Nora, aren't you?" A man in a dark suit stood there, his gray eyes sharp but kind. "Marcus Reed, attorney," he said, extending a manila folder. "I've been looking into your father's dealings. This isn't the first time." Nora's grip tightened on the receipt. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice low, urgent. Marcus glanced at Evelyn, who stared at the gate, her suitcase pathetically small. "Let's just say," he murmured, "Richard's name came up in a conversation I overheard today. A scam. A pattern. And I think you're ready to stop it." Nora looked at Evelyn, her grandmother's face etched with a pain that cut deeper than the airport's cold air. She thought of Evelyn's heart surgery 6 months ago, the way she'd whispered, "I just want one last adventure." This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a theft of hope, and Nora wouldn't let it stand. She turned to Marcus. "Tell me what to do." The terminal faded, the world narrowing to Evelyn's trembling hands and the folder in Marcus's grip. Somewhere, a stranger's voice echoed in Nora's mind, mentioning Richard's name in a hushed airport corner, tied to a scam that reached beyond their family. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. If you've ever felt the sting of family turning their back on someone you love, hit that like button. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories of standing up and fighting back. And in the comments, tell me, Have you ever had to protect someone you love from the people who should have loved them most? Nora Velasca sat in her Boise apartment, the hum of the radiator filling the silence. Her fingers traced the edge of a faded photo. Evelyn, her grandmother, laughing in a garden, her silver hair catching the sun. Evelyn had been Nora's anchor since she was 6, while her parents, Richard and Celeste, chased status in a world of gala dinners and country club memberships. Evelyn had taught Nora to knead dough, to name the stars, to find beauty in the ordinary. Richard was a real estate broker, his charm as polished as his cufflinks. He sold dreams of luxury condos, but came home with a temper that sharpened when Evelyn's name was mentioned. Celeste, a marketing consultant, curated their family's image like a Pinterest board, her smiles reserved for clients, not Nora. Family dinners were performances. Richard critiqued Nora's posture, Celeste debated wine pairings. Their voices filled the room, but never with warmth. Nora learned early to shrink, to nod, to wait for summer when Evelyn's modest Boise home became her refuge. Evelyn's kitchen smelled of rosemary and hope. She'd sold a family heirloom, a gold locket from her mother, to send Nora to summer camp at 10. Nora hadn't known then, but the sacrifice stung now, a reminder of Evelyn's quiet generosity. 6 months ago, Evelyn's heart surgery had changed her. The scar on her chest was small, but her eyes carried a new urgency, a hunger to mend the family she'd lost to her children's ambition. She'd call Richard, leave voicemails about Sunday brunch. He rarely answered.
Nora saw it all, the way Richard's jaw tightened when Evelyn praised Nora's nursing job, the way Celeste's lips thinned when Nora chose Evelyn House for Christmas over their Aspen condo. They never said it, but Nora felt their resentment, a cold current beneath their polished manners. Evelyn didn't see it. She believed in second chances, in family. She'd tell Nora stories of Richard as a boy, building birdhouses in her yard, his hands steady and kind. "That boy's still in there," she'd say, her voice soft with faith. Nora wanted to believe her. But she remembered the summer she was 12 when Richard sold Evelyn's old piano to fund a yacht rental. Evelyn had smiled, said she didn't play much anymore. Nora saw the lie in her trembling hands, the same hands that now shook at gate C4. Evelyn's heart condition made her trust more desperate. She'd whispered to Nora, "I don't have many years left. I want us together, just once." Her hope was a fragile thing, a glass ornament Nora couldn't bear to see shatter. But it had shattered. Richard's betrayal at the airport wasn't just a lie about a ticket. It was the culmination of years of sidelining Evelyn, of taking her love and giving nothing back. The receipt Nora found, $30,000 funneled into a real estate deal, proved it wasn't a mistake, it was a plan. Nora set the photo down, her chest tight. She thought of Evelyn's garden, the yellow roses she'd planted with Nora, their petals bright against Boise's gray winters. Evelyn had said roses meant hope, not joy. "Joy fades," she'd murmured. "Hope you keep alive." Nora's hope was alive, but it burned with anger. She wouldn't let Evelyn's faith be stolen again. The stranger's voice at the airport mentioning Richard's name in a scam echoed in her mind. There was more to this, and she'd find it. She picked up her phone, Marcus Reed's number glowing on the screen. Her finger hovered, steady, ready. Evelyn's roses bloomed in her memory, and Nora knew this fight was for her. The air in Evelyn's Boise dining room was thick with cinnamon and deceit. Nora Velasca, 28, sat at the mahogany table, her fork idle as she watched her father Richard carve the turkey with surgical precision. Evelyn, her grandmother, glowed in her apron, her cheeks flushed from hours over the stove. She'd made her sweet potato casserole, the kind that drew neighbors to her door decades ago. Now it drew her family, Richard, Celeste, Aunt Lauren, and their kids for a Thanksgiving that felt too perfect, too staged. Richard's smile was wide, his voice honeyed. He leaned toward Evelyn, his Rolex catching the chandelier's light. "Mom, we've been thinking. A family trip to Italy, Venice, Rome, all of us together."
Evelyn Spoon paused mid-stir in her tea. Her eyes, bright despite her heart surgery, flickered with something Nora hadn't seen in years. Hope. "Oh, Richard," she murmured, "that sounds wonderful, but my health—" Celeste cut in, her voice smooth as a press release. "We've planned it all, Mom. Accessible hotels, private tours, no strain on your heart." "You deserve this." Nora's stomach twisted. She knew that tone. Celeste's pitch for clients, not family. Aunt Laura nodded, her earrings glinting. "Mom, you've never seen the Coliseum. It's time." The kids, Ethan and Mia, mumbled agreement, their eyes on their phones. The room felt like a theater, everyone playing their part. Nora caught Richard's glance at Celeste, a flicker of something calculated, like a deal closing. Later, as Evelyn cleared plates, Richard's phone buzzed. He stepped into the hallway, his voice low but sharp. Nora followed, pretending to fetch water. "The deal's set," he muttered. "30 grand covers it. No, she won't ask questions." Nora froze, her pulse a drumbeat. 30 grand. Evelyn's savings, the last of her teaching pension. She slipped back to the table, her hands cold. Richard returned, all smiles, and raised his glass. "To family," he said. "To Italy." Evelyn beamed, her frail hands clasping Nora's. "I've always wanted us together," she whispered. Nora forced a smile, but her eyes darted to Richard's briefcase, left open by the couch. A paper peeked out, a travel itinerary, typed and crisp. When Evelyn stepped out to refill the gravy, Nora grabbed it. Her breath caught. The itinerary listed only Richard, Celeste, Lauren, and the kids. No Evelyn. Worse, the agency's name was unfamiliar, tied to a real estate firm, not a travel company. Nora's chest burned. She wanted to scream, to rip the paper in front of them. But Evelyn returned, her smile fragile, her hope a glass house. "I called the bank," she said softly. "The money's ready, 30,000. Richard hugged her, too quick, too practiced. "You're making this possible, Mom," he said. Nora's fists clenched under the table. She thought of Evelyn's roses, their roots deep in Boise soil, their petals defying winter. Evelyn's hope was like those roses, stubborn, alive, but so easily crushed. She should have spoken, should have demanded answers, but Evelyn's joy, so rare after years of being sidelined, stopped her. Nora saw the scar beneath Evelyn's sweater, a reminder of her fragile heart. This trip was Evelyn's last chance to feel wanted. Nora tucked the itinerary back, her resolution hardening. Richard's hushed call, the forged itinerary, weren't mistakes. They were pieces of a plan, and Nora would unravel it for Evelyn's sake. The Boise International Airport hummed with chaos, a blur of rolling suitcases and farewells. Nora Velasca, 28, stood by gate C4, her hand steadying Evelyn, whose navy cardigan sagged under the weight of betrayal. Evelyn's fingers clutched an empty boarding pass envelope, her face pale as the linoleum floor. "I don't understand," she whispered, her voice fraying like old thread. "Richard said it was all arranged." Richard, Nora's father, stood at the check-in counter, his voice sharp, clipped. "It's a glitch, Mom," he said, not meeting her eyes. "Your heart condition, too risky for a long flight." Nora's blood roared. She saw the lie in his posture, the way he adjusted his tie, avoiding Evelyn's gaze. Celeste, her mother, fussed with her scarf, muttering about turbulence. Aunt Lauren and her kids, Ethan and Mia, scrolled their phones, their silence louder than the airport's din. Evelyn's knees buckled. She gripped Nora's arm, her breath shallow. Nora caught her, heart pounding. "Grandma? Sit down," she urged, guiding her to a bench. Evelyn's face was gray, her scar from heart surgery a faint shadow under her sweater. "I paid," Evelyn murmured, her voice barely audible. $30,000 for the family." Richard shrugged, his smile thin. You made this trip possible, Mom. We'll bring you photos, stories. He turned toward the gate, Celeste and Lauren trailing like actors exiting a stage. Nora's eyes caught a crumpled paper in Richard's open bag. She snatched it, her fingers trembling. A receipt. $30,000, R. Velasca, Pinnacle Realty Trust. Not a travel agency. A real estate scam, the kind whispered about in Boise's coffee shops. Her fury surged, a wildfire in her chest. He hadn't just lied. He'd stolen Evelyn's hope, her savings, her last chance at family. Nora stuffed the receipt in her pocket, her resolve ironclad. A man approached, his coat worn but neat, his eyes sharp. "You're the granddaughter," he said, voice low. "I'm Detective Harris, retired. Overheard your father's name at the counter. He's tied to a scam I've been tracking." He slipped Nora his card, his gaze steady. "Call me if you need a witness." Nora nodded, her throat tight. Evelyn sat still, staring at the gate where her family disappeared. They boarded without a glance, their laughter echoing like a slap. Nora knelt beside her. "I'm staying," she said. "You're not alone." Evelyn's eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. "I thought they wanted me," she said, her voice a ghost. Nora took her hand, the weight of the receipt burning in her pocket. Detective Harris's card felt like a lifeline, a promise of justice. They walked out of the terminal, Evelyn's small suitcase trailing behind. The November wind bit at their faces, but Nora felt only heat, a resolve forged in the receipt's black ink. Richard thought he'd won, that Evelyn's trust was a blank check. He was wrong. Nora saw Evelyn's roses in her mind, their yellow petals defiant against the cold. She'd fight for Evelyn, for the woman who'd given her everything. The detective's card, the receipt, they were weapons now, and Nora was ready to wield them. Nora Velasca sat at Evelyn's kitchen table, the scent of chamomile tea faint in the air. The receipt from Richard's bag, $30,000 funneled to Pinnacle Realty Trust, lay crumpled beside her laptop, its edges worn from her restless fingers. Evelyn, 78, stood by the sink, washing dishes with slow, deliberate movements. Her navy cardigan hung loose, her scar from heart surgery hidden, but ever present in Nora's mind. The silence between them was heavy, not with anger, but with the weight of what had been stolen. Nora's screen glowed with a news article. Boise widow, 80, loses life savings to family scam. The story mirrored Evelyn's, another elder betrayed by those she trusted. Nora's chest tightened. She turned the laptop toward Evelyn. "This could have been you," she said softly, "but it's not too late." Evelyn's hand stilled, soap dripping onto the counter. "I don't want to fight them, Nora. They're my children." Her voice cracked, her eyes distant, as if searching for the boy Richard once was, hammering birdhouses in her yard. Nora leaned forward. "They used your heart condition as an excuse. They took your money for a scam, not a trip. You deserve justice." Evelyn's gaze fell to the receipt, then back to Nora. Something shifted, a spark in her tired eyes. Nora dialed Marcus Reed, the lawyer from the airport. His voice was calm, steady, like a river carving stone. "Tell me everything," he said. Nora recounted the airport betrayal, the receipt, Detective Harris's card. She hesitated, then added, "There's more. Evelyn gave Richard power of attorney years ago." Marcus paused. "That complicates things," he said. "It gives him legal access to her accounts, but not to deceive her. We can challenge it. Meet me tomorrow. Bring Evelyn and any bank records you have." The next day, Marcus arrived at Evelyn's house, his gray suit sharp, but his demeanor soft. He sat across from Evelyn, his hands folded like an old friend's. "Mrs. Velasca, what happened at the airport wasn't just cruel, it's likely illegal. Elder financial exploitation." Evelyn clutched her teacup, her knuckles white. I trusted them, she whispered. Marcus nodded. Trust is what they exploited. With your permission, we can recover your funds and protect you moving forward. Nora watched Evelyn's face, the doubt warring with resolve. She thought of the news article, the widow left penniless. Grandma, Nora said, you taught me to stand up for what is right. Now let me stand up for you. Evelyn's lips trembled, but she nodded. All right, she said, her voice firmer. If you believe this is right, Nora, I trust you. They began that afternoon. Nora pulled bank statements from Evelyn's desk, her fingers brushing an old photo of Evelyn and her late husband, smiling by a lake. The statements showed withdrawals, small at first, then larger, all to Richard's accounts.
Marcus scanned the documents, his jaw tight. This isn't just one lie, he said. It's a pattern. He handed Nora Detective Harris's card. Call him. We need every piece of this puzzle. Nora felt the weight of the receipt, the card, the news story. They were building something unbreakable, a case as strong as Evelyn's roses, blooming despite the frost. Evelyn watched from her chair, her hands steady now, her hope no longer in her children, but in justice. Nora Velasca hunched over Evelyn's dining table, the Boise evening casting long shadows across the bank statements. Each page was a wound, $2,000 here, $5,000 there, all siphoned to Richard's accounts over years, long before the $30,000 airport betrayal. Evelyn sat by the window, her pen scratching in a leather-bound journal. Her silver hair caught the lamplight, her face calm but resolute, as if writing had become her rebellion. She hadn't journaled in decades, but now her words spilled out, raw and unfiltered, a map of her pain. Nora met Marcus Reed at the bank, where a teller named Carla, her glasses perched low, recognized Evelyn's name. I've seen your father here, she said, her voice hushed. He'd withdraw from her accounts, always with a smile, saying it was for family. It never sat right. Carla printed a transaction history, her hands quick, her eyes sharp with indignation. The records confirmed it. Richard's real estate scam, Pinnacle Realty Trust, wasn't a one-time fraud. Evelyn's savings had been his personal vault for years. Nora's pulse quickened. She thought of Evelyn's heart surgery, the way she'd clutched Nora's hand in the hospital, whispering, I just want them to see me. Richard hadn't seen her. He'd seen dollar signs. Back at Evelyn's house, Nora found a letter tucked in a drawer, yellowed and worn. It was from Evelyn's late husband, dated a decade ago, his handwriting steady but urgent. Stand up to them, Evelyn, it read. Our children think love is a transaction. Don't let them take your heart. Nora's throat tightened. She handed the letter to Evelyn, who read it silently, her fingers tracing the ink. I forgot he wrote this, she murmured. He always knew. Marcus arrived, his briefcase heavy with documents. He spread them out. Carla's statement, the receipt from the airport, Detective Harris's notes from a call Nora had made. Harris had confirmed Pinnacle Realty was under investigation, tied to Richard's name. It's enough for a civil case, Marcus said. Maybe criminal if we push. Evelyn set her journal down, her voice steady. I don't want revenge, she said. I want them to know I'm not invisible. Nora nodded, her anger softening into pride. Evelyn's strength was blooming, like her yellow roses defying Boise's winter. They worked late, scanning documents, drafting affidavits. Evelyn made coffee, her hands no longer trembling. She paused once, staring at a photo of Richard as a boy, his grin wide and untainted. I raised him better, she said softly. Nora touched her shoulder. You gave him everything. He chose this. Evelyn nodded, her eyes clear. Then let's finish it. The letter from Evelyn's husband felt like a spark, igniting Nora's resolve. It wasn't just about the $30,000 anymore. It was about every withdrawal, every lie, every moment Richard had made Evelyn feel small. The case was a house of cards, and Nora was ready to pull the foundation. Marcus closed his laptop, his voice calm but firm. "When they land tomorrow, we'll be waiting." Nora saw Evelyn's journal, its pages thick with truth. She knew then, they weren't just building a case, they were rebuilding Evelyn's voice, one word at a time. Boise International Airport buzzed with arrivals, the air sharp with coffee and anticipation. Nora Velasca, 28, stood by the gate, her pulse steady as a metronome. Beside her, Marcus Reed adjusted his tie, his manila folder a quiet weapon in his hand. Richard emerged first, his suitcases plastered with stickers from Venice. Celeste followed, her hair flawless, her smile curated for Instagram. Aunt Lauren trailed, her sunglasses perched like armor, while Ethan and Mia laughed at their phones, oblivious to the storm ahead. Nora stepped forward, her voice clear. "Richard Velasca," she said. Marcus handed him a summons, his movements precise. "Celeste Velasca, Lauren Brooks. These are for you." The papers landed like stones, their weight sinking into the family's smug ease. Richard's face froze, his eyes scanning the document. "What is this?" he stammered, his charm cracking. Marcus's voice was calm, unyielding. "Legal notice of investigation. Financial exploitation of Evelyn Velasca. Respond within 7 days or face a lawsuit." Celeste's scarf slipped, her composure fraying. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "Mom gave us that money." Nora's gaze hardened. "You lied about the trip. You used her savings for your scam. She's not your bank." Lauren ripped off her sunglasses, her voice shrill. "You're turning on your own family, Nora?" Before Nora could answer, Richard leaned close, his voice low, oily. "Drop this, Nora. I'll wire you 10 grand by tomorrow. Walk away." Nora's stomach churned, but her resolve held. "I'm not for sale," she said, her words cutting the air. "Unlike you." Richard's face darkened, his jaw tight, but he said nothing. Marcus stepped between them, his presence a wall. "Mediation is next," he said. "Don't miss it." Nora turned, her heart pounding, but not with fear, with clarity. She saw their panic, their polished masks slipping, and felt no pity. They didn't show for mediation. Marcus wasn't surprised. People like them think silence wins, he said. It didn't. The judge ruled in Evelyn's favor, $30,000 restitution, due in 30 days. More followed. A hold on Richard, Celeste, and Lauren's inheritance claims, a recommendation to revoke their rights entirely. Back at Evelyn's house, Nora handed her the ruling. Evelyn turned the papers over, her fingers steady, her scar a faint line under her sweater. "They really did this," she said. Not with shock, but with quiet confirmation. That night, a letter arrived from Celeste, its tone pleading, laced with guilt. Evelyn read it once, her face unreadable. Then she walked to the fireplace, lit a match, and burned it, the flames curling the paper to ash. "I'm done carrying their weight," she said, her voice firm. Nora watched, pride swelling. Evelyn called her estate attorney the next morning, her instructions clear. "Remove Richard, Celeste, and Lauren from my will," she said. "No portion. They've taken enough." The act wasn't vengeance, it was freedom. Evelyn's journal lay open on the table, its pages filled with truths she'd reclaimed. Nora saw her grandmother's roses in her mind, their yellow petals fierce against the frost. Justice wasn't just the money or the will, it was Evelyn standing tall, no longer invisible. Evelyn's Boise home glowed under the spring sun, its yellow roses a quiet riot against the fence. Nora Velasca, 28, watched her grandmother, 78, kneel in the garden, her hands steady in the soil. Evelyn's scar from heart surgery was hidden, but her strength was not. She'd changed since the airport betrayal, not hardened, but clarified, like glass polished by time. She painted now, her canvases bold with blues and golds, each stroke a reclaiming of her voice. Her journal, once a private confession, lay open on the kitchen table, its pages thick with gratitude and truth. Nora found it one evening, after Evelyn had gone to bed. The final entry read, "Nora gave me back my heart, not just my money. I'm not invisible anymore." Beside it was a note, tucked in an envelope, proof of a $5,000 donation to a Boise elder charity, made in secret. Evelyn hadn't just fought for herself, she'd fought for others. The court's ruling had returned the $30,000, but the real victory was Evelyn's peace. She'd closed her joint accounts with Richard, transferring her savings to a trust with Nora as advocate. "I trust you," she'd said, her voice soft but sure. "You always saw me." They returned to routines, simple and sacred. Mornings in the garden, afternoons baking bread, evenings with watercolor classes at the community center. Evelyn's laughter filled the house, lighter now, unburdened by the weight of her children's greed. One painting stood out, a single yellow rose, its petals vivid against the stormy sky. She called it Hope Endures. At a local craft fair, it sold for $200, and Evelyn smiled not for the money, but for the stranger who saw her story in its lines. Nora enrolled in Idaho State's gerontology program, driven by Evelyn's journal and the elder charity's work. She wanted to be a voice for those silenced, like Evelyn had been. The roses outside became her anchor, their blooms a promise to keep fighting. One autumn morning, Nora found Evelyn by the window, wrapped in her favorite quilt. "I'm slower now," she whispered, her eyes on the roses. "But they'll bloom again, won't they?" "Always," Nora said, brushing Evelyn's silver hair. 2 weeks later, Evelyn passed in her sleep, her face calm, her journal by her bedside. No pain, no drama, just peace, as she'd wanted. At the funeral, Boise's community gathered. The florist who'd helped Evelyn choose seeds, Carla, the bank teller, her eyes wet, the watercolor teacher clutching Hope Endures. Even Detective Harris sent a note. She was a force. Nora buried Evelyn near a lake, under an oak, a bouquet of yellow roses at her grave, tied with a ribbon reading EV. The wind stirred, soft as a whisper, and Nora felt Evelyn's presence urging her forward. Now, Nora works with the Elder Justice Initiative, investigating abuse, rewriting stories of betrayal into ones of strength. She lives in Evelyn's house, the roses brighter each spring. Every morning, she sips tea on the porch, the garden a sea of gold, and feels Evelyn's legacy in her bones. "Hope isn't joy," Evelyn once said. "Joy fades. Hope is what you keep alive." Nora keeps it alive. For Evelyn, for every elder whose trust is stolen. Her journal, her roses, her donation, they're a light that doesn't dim. If Evelyn's story moved you, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to know they're not invisible. Subscribe for more stories of resilience. Comment below. What legacy of hope are you carrying forward? Let's honor those who teach us to bloom.